From Fox News, it's The Campaign with Bret Baier.
Last week, both President Trump and Democratic presidential nominee, former Vice President Joe Biden, visited Kenosha, Wisconsin in the aftermath of the police shooting of Jacob Blake. While announcing record-breaking fundraising, Biden made multiple media appearances throughout the week, weighing in on the economy, the pandemic, the ongoing civil unrest. Meanwhile, President Trump held a rally in the battleground state of Pennsylvania, praising the work of law enforcement, condemning protesters, and calling for more law and order. In addition to the campaign trail, the schedule for the 2020 presidential debates was announced last week, and Fox's own Chris Wallace will be moderating the first of three debates on September 29th in Cleveland, Ohio. Susan Page of USA Today, frequent podcast panelist, Washington bureau chief there, she'll moderate the vice presidential debate on October 7th in Salt Lake City, Utah. And Steve Scully of C-SPAN, Kirsten Welker of NBC round out the rest of the moderators. We'll start there with our socially distant panel. Editor and CEO of The Dispatch, Stephen Hayes, political editor at the National Journal, Josh Kraushaar, and Fox News Politics editor, Chris Stirewalt. Okay, guys. Chris, that first debate really will set the table for the rest of the campaign. I mean, we can't kind of overstate the magnitude of that political moment, right?
Well, you'd think so, but then again, I compared this electorate to the digestive system of a goose. It doesn't seem to hold on to anything for very long, and the race keeps reverting back.
So bad.
It does, and I don't know. People's attitudes are so dug in. I think when you talk about these debates, and it's good to have their best moderator up first in Chris Wallace, because that'll set the tone, and that's the stuff. And there's probably not going to be any crowd there. It's going to be a tough space. The expectations for Biden are really low, and the expectations for Trump are really high. And he's going to, myrtleize Biden, he says. And we read today, Politico reports that the Trump campaign is trying to get the president to take seriously the work of preparation and take seriously this stuff, which he didn't do. He ad-libbed in 2016. They want him to have his zingers ready and be ready to go. So they know that they've got a high bar to reach.
Josh, thoughts?
I mean, the debate is one of the biggest moments left in the campaign. We saw that, I think you got a small bounce from the conventions. President Trump's job approval up to about 43% in the average national polls, but that's not enough to win an election in all likelihood. So he's going to need to have a moment. He's going to need to underscore the argument he's making that Joe Biden is kind of a hostage of the left in the Democratic Party, that he may not be ready for prime time. And he's going to have to hammer that home in that first debate with Chris Wallace. It's tough. I mean, historically, you do see some debates that really changed the race in the immediate aftermath. I'm thinking 2012, when Mitt Romney had a very strong and defining debate performance against then President Obama. But then after the next two debates and after all the debates were finished, the bounce dissipated, and Obama was able to regain his momentum. So, this is the fact that we don't have a real campaign trail. We're starting to see actual campaign this week, but it's not going to be the same as normal. Those debates are going to matter a whole lot, and Trump is going to really have to reset the trajectory of the campaign.
Well, I mean, I will say, Steve, that the questions, we said that Biden took questions, and he did take a few questions. And over this past week and recent days, they haven't really been that pointed, the questioning. They've been pretty... That's so generous. It's very generous. I mean, it was a little bit of what enchants you. It really was kind of over the top on Friday.
Yeah, there was a press briefing Friday, and I mean the questions were sort of the height of absurdity. Are you, Mr. Vice President? Are you magnificent or awesome?
Why aren't you more angry?
Yeah,
why aren't you more angry? It wasn't good. Whoa!
Look, there are real questions to ask Joe Biden. I mean, I think one of the things we've seen in this sort of campaign, non-campaign so far, is that with the coronavirus dominating certain aspects of the debate and the economy taking up whatever oxygen is left, you haven't really seen sort of deeply penetrating questions for either candidate on issues. And Joe Biden, of course, hasn't subjected himself to much media questioning. And Donald Trump, even when he gets those kinds of questions, likes to turn them to attacks on Joe Biden or smacks at the media or name calling or what have you. There's a really interesting and important policy to be had here. And if you look at Joe Biden in particular, a lot of the things he's proposing, I would argue, are awfully far to the left, even relative to what Hillary Clinton ran on in 2016 and Barack Obama ran on in 2012. You look at his $11 trillion in proposed new spending over the next decade, that is orders of magnitude more than his Democratic predecessors proposed. So I would hope and expect that in a more serious format, he would get some of those kinds of questions to press him. And I think Donald Trump is going to have to answer for all of the, he gets, when he sits down with friendly interviewers, as he prefers to do, he gets questions that allow him to turn the questions into easy attacks or sound bites, or he goes off on some ramble. He's not going to be able to do that in this format. So I do think, even though that if you believe they're going to be competing over these undecided voters, there aren't many of them left. I think Josh is right. The potential impact of the debates could be pretty significant, because I expect that they'll be questioned on things they haven't really spoken to that much.
Yeah. Is it fair, Chris, to say that the Biden campaign right now is and from the convention on has pitched it as Joe Biden brings normalcy back? He is a decent man who respects the office and would bring kind of that presidential aura back to the Oval Office. But when it comes to policy, he's not going to get into specific policy. The other day in Kenosha, he said, I could talk about my tax policy, but they'll shoot me at one point in that in that Q&A, which is not the best images in Kenosha at that time. But I think the other side is Donald Trump, who's saying, listen, you may not like me, you may not like the tweets, but here's the things I've done, and here are the policies that I have. It's almost the exact opposite pitch.
So, Trump went into the Republican convention with Democrats making three principal charges against him. The first was that he is a bigot. I think Republicans substantially and effectively rebutted that claim, whether it was, a Muslim woman, people of color from around the world being naturalized, or Tim Scott's speech, or whatever. The Republicans, Walker. I think, made Herschel Walker. Through all of those things, Republicans, I think, made a very good argument that they were a party, an inclusive party, and that Donald Trump was not bigoted. So I think they effectively dealt with it. Then there's two other questions about Trump. One is he, and this relates to what he was impeached for, and this relates to complaints about his use of the White House. Is he self-dealing? Is he using his office to further his own dreams, goals, wishes, and wealth? And then the last one and most important one, allegation from Democrats, is that Trump failed on the coronavirus and is failing still. The best thing about the unrest and the racial tensions in the United States for Trump, however the issue cuts, it's not about coronavirus. Every day that they're not talking about coronavirus, that's good for Trump, because voters overwhelmingly disapprove of his handling of the situation. So I think for Trump, he wants this to be a personal campaign. He's better than Biden, and Biden wants it to be a personal campaign. He says, I'm better than Trump. But when you get down to it, for Trump, the issue, even if he could go to the issue sets, even if he could go to that place, they don't want to talk about coronavirus, and coronavirus is the unescapable thing about 2020.
Guys, let's hold it right there. We'll continue after this.
Steve, the thing that came up Thursday into Friday is this Atlantic piece, and unnamed sources, but about his trip to France and whether he goes to the cemetery or not, and whether he used the word losers and suckers in reference to U.S. war dead. White House pushes back extremely hard on this. John Bolton comes out and gives an on-the-record interview in which he says, essentially, I didn't hear anything like that, and if I did, don't you think I'd put it in my book? Which is a fair point, and saying that the call was made by a weather call. We have other reporting saying that people heard the president say this. So how does this play out? And Would you have gone with that story without anybody on the record?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because only Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, knows who his sources are on that. I mean, if I have good sources, if I have 4 solid sources who I trust, I would have reported the story. You know, and it's interesting that Fox's own Jennifer Griffin, whose reporting I trust just about more than anybody I follow closely, has confirmed several aspects of the story.
She said that it rings true, according to her sources, but nobody was in the room. So, but some other elements about other talks about Vietnam and that, you know, like her reporting is a little bit more nuanced. But go ahead.
Yeah. So look, I think this is one of those stories that will preoccupy Washington, and there will be a ton of back and forth on it. And do you believe him? Do you not believe him? And I'm not sure it tells us anything particularly new about Donald Trump. I mean, it is the case.
Well, the things about John McCain, he said publicly. I mean, he said
and they're
those
very
things.
similar.
To listen to the rest of this episode, go to foxnewspodcast.com.